Hello, welcome. It's Frances here. Thank you for coming back to my channel. If this is your first time here, I bid thee welcome. There is a subscribe button below and a bell if you want to be notified as to when I upload more content, which I do on a rather ad hoc basis. And the more subscribers that I have means the closer I get to my target, so I can do some YouTube live question and answer sessions. So that's my goal. But in this video, I'm wanting to talk a little bit about self-knowledge, sort of stemming on from the Hermetic principles that I have mentioned in a previous video. But self-knowledge is not necessarily a metaphysical concept, though it can be used in metaphysical circles, but it's also considered in some circles to be the primary source of power for the witch. So to start off, I suppose it's best to look at us, who we are. And effectively, we are all stardust, exploded remnants from the Big Bang that created our universe. And infamous, or just magician, Aleister Crowley did mention that every man and every woman is a star. So we are effectively, essentially, divine beings having an earthly experience and not the other way around. And in another tradition that's of the fairy, so it's F-E-R-I tradition, because there are a number of traditions called fairy traditions, that Victor and Cora Anderson founded. And I think this is actually a paraphrase from one of the teachings of Victor Anderson. He mentioned that I am a molecule of the universe and of the great divine, the god and the goddess, of whom we are all part of. And I've sort of put the emphasis on that because it means that as humans, as spiritual beings, as witches, how we interact with the world and all its inhabitants, other humans, other beings, plants, animals, beings that we can and cannot see, innate objects, they are all on an evil pegging along with us. However, as a whole, we humans are pretty dismal when it comes to reacting with everybody else or everything else that we share this planet with. As divine beings, we have incarnated here on this plane, and it's almost as if the universe or the gods have called us back to this circle to be here in this moment, in this time, to wear our divine self like a mantle. Yet, for the most part, most of us tend to reject this. We don't see it as an honour because we don't like being held accountable for our actions, and we tend to shirk our responsibilities. And in doing so, it's probably more tempting for us to find the easier, quicker route through life that doesn't require us to put much thought or action into it. We tend to get distracted by all the glittery things, which are often short-lived, and we choose those over the more difficult tasks, journeys that bring us back and closer to our soul. And in doing that, we drift further and further away from the true purpose as to why we have been incarnated in this present point in time in the first place. The world is chaotic, especially over the last couple of years. It's getting more and more chaotic and more confusing with our more modern technology that tends to hinder. Doesn't necessarily always help. It distracts us. We've got, I don't really like going on and on about social media, but that's a huge distraction. And we have formed this sort of attachment to the instant, as I said, to the glitter. We are increasingly becoming very egocentric, very head-driven. And we are losing touch of dropping into our heart, into our soul, really connecting back to what is important, becoming very visual. Everything's very instant and visual, yet we're not listening. And when we drop out of this head, out of what is called the monkey mind, or the distractions, or the noise, and listening without judgment, without preconceived ideas, without fear, just listening, we can then start to reconnect back to what is important and regain that self-knowledge of, most importantly, who we are, and get back into touch with our soul as to our sole purpose in this incarnation. Aleister Crowley also stated that the idea of our ability to perceive our own failings, and this is what happens when we drop out of our head into our heart, we realize that we are flawed beings. But to perceive our own failings actually comes ahead of our ability to manage them. So accepting who we are, the good, the bad, the ugly, and especially the ugly, not ignoring them, not casting them aside, saying that we've dealt with them when really we haven't. Going within, whether you do it through shadow work or just simply through observation, can be very confrontational, especially when faced with aspects of ourselves that we don't like, that we have been told are not spiritual, not appropriate. But these aspects that we keep shoving into our subconscious will rise to the forefront at some stage. They are part of us. They are what makes us unique in who we are. And the reason they rise has meaning and purpose behind it. Sometimes we understand, sometimes we don't. And often it is simply to acknowledge and then let it go. The realization that we are flawed beings can be very relieving, yet contradicts what we see on social media, in particular with all these holier, perfected, so-called spiritual gurus. But we also need, or we realize too, that our own path is our own. We don't need to compare what we do to anybody else. And this goes against what we are often taught in our societies, in particular the Western culture, which is almost forcing us to compete, to compare ourselves externally to other people, to our peers, to everybody else around us. And while that may be appropriate as a guide, a marker to see how we are progressing, when it comes to spirituality or magic in particular, we all work at our own pace. We are all individuals, so our magical work is all very individualistic. Even if we are involved with a coven or a training circle, what we bring and what we receive is still very individualistic. And if we can't acknowledge who we are, if we can't accept our true self in this present point in time, and we continue to ignore, to overlook aspects of ourselves, but also ignoring key issues, key signs, key instructions, key guidings from God, Goddess, Divine Source, our higher self, whatever you want to call it. And these markers are often there to help us shape our lives as we progress through our own spiritual, magical journey. So it's important to keep in mind that not everything that glitters is gold. Often what glitters fades very quickly. And we mustn't get into the habit of, once it stops being so glittery and perfect, to chuck it away. What we do in our physical realm and our physical daily lives also affects our magical lives. So we must be able to have the two running on par. Otherwise, who are we cheating? We're cheating our own true self. We're not cheating our tradition or our other coven members or some big goddess, spiritual guru in the sky. The only person we are actually cheating is ourselves and delaying our own journey. So self-knowledge is just that, knowledge of the self, going within, having a look, not only at the things that we're good at, but also the things that we're not so good at, the things that maybe be out of our reach, our capabilities at this present point in time, and that's okay. Moving forward. And from going within and understanding a little bit more about ourselves, also the direction that we want to head into. This is where the knowledge comes from. We are able to then create a foundation upon which our own true witch power can take shape without it being compared or enhanced by anybody else. Our own true power comes through self-knowledge. Blessings.